So we will begin now the three panels that we have. They've been divided into looking into the socio-cultural and economic possibilities around such a magnificent and large project, then some of the environmental concerns, and also thinking of issues around urban transitions. And we'll begin with the first panel. There's been some last minute reshuffling, which is inevitable, but uh, kicking off with the first panel, and I'll just introduce the panel, but let me sort of contextualize, the discussion that is going to ensue. So it is obvious that neglect and pollution of water bodies leads major cities to miss out on important growth opportunities. Successful waterfront cities can and do attract more opportunities and resources for effective urban management. A well-restored waterfront combined with astute management, on the other hand, can spark evident vibrancy, while at the same time contributing to environmental and economic resilience. Planning a new waterfront city requires an integrated development strategy and carefully aligning investment for not only property development, but also water-related infrastructure to help revitalize and enable equitable access to precious freshwater resources. Yet these are aspirational goals. Life is more complex, and implementing ambitious plans can be challenging. Let me now bring in my two esteemed discussants who will individually provide their insights on how a mega project like the Ravi Riverfront Urban Development Project can secure economic benefit, and on what are some of its socio-cultural and economic implications. They may also want to consider what lessons can be learned from other riverfront development projects, which can be applied within the context of Ravi's urban development to address the inequities and pressures facing burgeoning cities of the global south, especially those located along historic rivers like Lahore. So we are actually very lucky. So rather than this being just an academic exercise, we wanted it to have policy value. So for the first panel, we have actually the CEO of RUDA with us, Mr. Imran Amin, and we have a very seasoned economist who has had long engagement also with the international donor community. So with these words, I will we'll kick off. I'll ask Mr. Imran Amin to begin, and then we'll have Dr. Ijaz Nabi give his remarks, and then we'll open it up for a conversation.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, BNU, for inviting RUDA for this very honorable and esteemed conference over here, attended by our RUDA officers over here, as well as community experts, environmental experts, the legal experts over here, the educational fraternity. Thank you very much for giving us this chance to show some of the vision that RUDA has currently working on, and then probably learn from this experience as well, as you rightly mentioned, how can we improve on the development side of the project that is currently happening, including all the difficulties, the challenges that is always there attached with the mega projects like RUDA, and how do we integrate the modern infrastructure, urban development challenges as well as opportunities, and then how do we integrate that with environmental studies, or as Professor Westco rightly pointed out, the design or the conventional or the unconventional design issues that we would face on this project. Now, just to give you a refresher of what and how RUDA was formed, the project was actually conceived back in 2008, 2009, and the idea revolved around the river, restoration, channelization, and how to restore the Ravi River, how to control the unplanned growth that was happening over there, haphazard growth, and effectively manage that in terms of the floodplain, uh, other environmental challenges that this depleting river had. As you're aware, we had issues of wastewater, unplanned developments that were going on, large dump sites, nowhere to be taken, no landfill sites in Lahore, proper engineered landfill sites were not there. And then the waste streams going in the river. So these were some of the challenges that were summarized by the government at that time. And then there were a series of numerous studies that were done by ADB, by different consultants. JICA did a transportation study and a master plan study on it as well. Minart was part of it as well. Minart did it later in 2014 when it was specifically given by LDA for a river that includes development as well. And in that study, they had, at that time, looked at the waste side, the environment side, the economic side, the planning side, and the feasibility of that river that was to be done. 2020 was when the authority was formed, and it was given this mega challenge of transformation of this river, as well as completing or developing a master plan for this whole large area of around 140,000 acres. As soon as it started, I think it was started on a slightly negative note. The idea to start with the river got disconnected and started with the development side first. And that's okay. I would take it as a new startup where actually the authority started. And there was a lot of work that was to be done. So probably the initial 2 or 3 years phase was to focus more on the design aspect and the feasibility aspect of the project rather than the actual implementation. The team was actually formed when we joined, and lots of my colleagues were here in the room in somewhere mid or late of 2021. And at that time, we had a project in front of us. There were a lot of legal issues that were there. We had a number of the people who were living over there, unhappy people that was in that RUDA area, not happy with why RUDA is there. And this was previously, as I mentioned, was LDA and then was given to RUDA as a new authority. So with all these challenges, we initially took it one by one. The first one was to understand what the design was, what the vision was, and how do we translate that into a reality. Numerous meeting with irrigation, ADB. There was a whole flood commission that was managed with different departments in it. That was there. And then specific teams were formed that actually worked on the different segments of this project, including the forests land that were already available in this area, the wastewater treatment plants, the landfill sites, river hydrology, the development part of it. And all this was looked into in relation to the studies that were already done previously by different authorities, by different organizations previously. And the plan came in, although as I mentioned earlier, and as Professor Scott also rightly mentioned, that this is an ongoing process and we have these changes going on in our design perspective as well of how we want to see this. The first and foremost challenge was phase one. We started on that, and that was to make sure that we save that part of the river from the wastewater trains that were coming in, place it in a way that it is more fresh perennial body that is coming in, and to see how water is actually reacting in terms of the monsoon or
the summer part and as well as the dry days, which is the winter. A study was done, initial studies, where it was proposed that we should have a concrete retaining walls over here as an embankments. Was not something that was agreed by the team and the consultants that we had on board. And we changed that to another embankments to make it more environmentally friendly and to make it more appealing in terms of the design or environment that we are doing out there. And based on that, the work initiated where we started initially with the river banks of the phase 1, which is 16 kilometers, 2 kilometers down from Saigon, going all the way down to LSM, which is the Horse Airport motorway. And the stretch is about 12 kilometers on the left and 12 kilometers on the right. The numbers were already there. The hydrology study that was done, that was revalidated by our teams, including the effect of the climate change in it. And that part of the design was also part of it. And then from 586,000 cubic of flooding protection study that was initially done was increased to 615,000 cubic through that study and revalidated by our physical as well as numerical design that we did on that river part. So 1 kilometer in average of the width of a river that was to be formed with earthen embankments, along with the promenade, as we call it, which is more green, and it would give way to the water in summers that they can rise up and then go down, giving the look of a fresh and a lively waterfront. This was the first challenge that we had when we started working on it. We are, alhamdulillah, almost done on one side where we've completed about 70% of the work. The other side we've already started. Phase 2 and phase 3 of the river, which is further downstream from LSM up until Gurdiara, were probably most challenging. We have encroachments over here, a large population living in this area, which is already encroached in the riverbed. So there's challenges how to move them, where to locate them. The studies done internally from our side. And then other challenge that authority faced was to stop more and more population that is coming in over here, and that's an unplanned population that is entering into this area. Now, as alongside that was another coordination effort that was to be done between the other government departments, including irrigation, the local government, Punjab Transport Department, WASA specifically, because the numerous projects of WASA that was to be done in this area and was not completed. That's wastewater treatment plants. The most important ones, because the drains that we currently have was all the waste that is coming down in the river. In these 2 years, what we have so far achieved is a complete plan of all these challenges that I've recently shared with you. And we have almost started on each of these segments that I've mentioned. So we've completed the study of wastewater treatment plants, forestations we started. Rakchok was the first forest that we took over. There was a barren lands in it that was critical trees. There's about 200, 250 acres that was already being covered, and we are converting that to an indigenous forest. So that's already on the way. Study and the design, procurement of land for all the wastewater treatment plant was done. The river channelization, as I mentioned, the first phase we already initiated. And then was the part of the studies of how do we work on these developments that are already there in that area. The hotspot of the smog season that is observed every year in Lahore is also in RUDA. So you have around 40 pyrolysis plants that are there in RUDA, and other factories that are not monitored, not regulated. And the hotspot that has been now identified is in that area where these factories are burning tires. You have lots of industries over there which are not regulated at all. You have around 130,000 of waste dump sites over here in this area. There's Mahmood Booty, which was already there. And then there's a 300 acre of another dump site, which is Lahore, which is also there in this area, right next to the ring road. And the environmental hazard that we have over here was something which was phenomenal, because this was something which was to be addressed immediately. We were also declared as the only place of Lahore which was declared as a methane point as well, by international as well as by the national studies. So this was then the second area that was required. So large consultations, groups were formed, these industries, by our environment department. Not all, but I would say that about 60% of them were converted to clean, or the other one were closed. Just in these last 2 months, we have closed around 30 pyrolysis plants that were the main pollutants for the smog that is coming in this season, and we really wish that this time we'll have a different smog season, hopefully from the point of view of RUDA that's in that area. And that idea to have a master plan over there was to give them an idea of a planned development rather than a development that is being done without any approval or without any industry. So the industries over here, near the city, especially these type of industries, were also not part of the master plan that we achieved for them. Thankfully, we had a very good response from the local community. We developed an industrial group, especially for this smog and this industrial group. RUDA were only the partners in it. The leading role was given to all these small industrialists or industry owners who were there, and they participated with us to inform and to educate all these people who are working and doing business in this area of how to make it clean and give at least a clean air to this city. Next was the other part was the Lahore and Mahmood Booty that I mentioned. A long conversation related to MC, and then we finally took over the Mahmood Booty dump site. We've already started working on it. It would be converted into a park and a solar park. Also, the PNU department is aiming to earn some carbon credits from it. Our whole idea was that these type of dump sites or landfill sites, which are not engineered, not proper landfill sites, it would not make sense. So in our master plan, an engineered landfill site is also being prepared around Babu Sahu, where there's a utility area that we have developed. There's 1,000 acre that is being kept by Wasa for their plants. We've kept our engineered landfill sites over there, so it can be done. So the whole idea of this discussion is the continuous planning that we are doing in this master plan, trying to bring more and more. The focus was not on development as perceived. The focus is more on the cleanliness of this city, and then come the proper planned development that will follow. We don't expect any investors or any people to come over there and invest in RUDA with the current condition of the river that we have over there. I'm very pleased that yesterday we had a group visited the site that we are working on, and they would have seen the earthen embankment that we have developed over there with Ravi. And inshallah, by next year, December, you will see both these sites as a proper waterfront. We're starting our first barrage as well. And that is around 1 kilometer from the LSM downstream, which will have a capacity of around 177 billion. Well, that's in 3, so I would say that around 700,000, more than 700,000 billion liter of water around over there in that first barrage, which would also act as a recharge for the groundwater as well. So as I mentioned, the whole project, we're looking at the environmental side of it, the development part of it, and then we are also aware of the financial part of how this will be funded. For the funding, we have a very little, or you can say no reliance on the government funding for this project.
we're working with the community, with the developers that are already there, to follow the master plan, develop centralized places over there, and pay a fee which is called TPID, that's the trunk development charges for this city, because the city is for everyone. And we had numerous sessions with them as well. We had a lot of resistance from these developers who are already there, didn't want it to spend any, but thankfully we had big groups who have now joined in and are helping us financing and funding this project. And they're also aware that the priority of the authority is first to go towards the infrastructure part of it and then the development part of it. The benefit you have from this sort of funding is that you will have a consistent infrastructure over there. Now, their existing population that is there, that was also to be catered and placed somewhere over there. We started off, as I mentioned, we have actually touched each and every aspect in the planning model that we have developed for this RUDA. We had around 73 villages that are already there in the RUDA's area. We wanted to have a plan of how do we manage these villages that are already there in the plan? How do we make part of, how do we make part, these villages make part of this community that we are developing? We started off with Nath. Nath village is one of the, that is located on the phase 1 of the project. And we designed all their infrastructure for them, their street lighting. We're developing a school over there, pavement of all the streets. So what do we want is, rather than taking them off or making walls around these villages, just make them part of that community that is there. The vision behind this was a consistent infrastructure that is available to all. So whether it's a village or whether it's a community, you don't need to leave the area. All we want is just to make sure that they are part of our community where we're developing something, a more appealing master planning that is being done for them. So that is being adopted. And these sections that we are making, so if it's a residential area, let it be a residential area. We don't have the industrial pockets going inside our residential areas or the commercial pockets. So each of these segments was thought through. The transportation links in Lahore, with Lahore, was very important, of how do we connect our RUDA city in terms of the transportation with Lahore, and how will it act in the next 5, 10, and 15 years. Punjab Mass Transit Authority, TIPA, LDA, RUDA. We had around 1 year of all studies that were being done. And we have a complete transportation plan now for each road, including the size, width, length, 478 kilometers to be precise, of the roads that are going to be developed over here, with the provision of MRT and BRT corridor in it. So there's no concept of going elevated over here in this city. It's already planned over there in that roads. And I hope it follows in the same way that it's been done. And this was also then agreed by all the parties, all the 4 parties that are related to this road infrastructure, that this was to be followed, including the ring road that is coming in, because there were 3 interventions that we have. We had the Lahore-Sialkot motorway and the Lahore ring road that was passing through the RUDA area. Then we had the Islamabad motorway. And now we have the M3 as well. SL3 and SL4 is also going through this area. So all the transportation plan, the infrastructure plan that was done was also in consultation with that, all these stakeholders that were there. The idea, as I mentioned, it's in a continuous planning process that is there. We are seeing every day and learning from the academia of how can we improve more and more towards the river side of it, and how can we make it more and more lively. And that is something we're always open to. We have never had a design portion that is closed. And in terms of the barrages that is being planned, we're very happy to share that with the panel as well over here, as well as our colleagues and friends. If you have a good development, the socio effect is always there. But it always has that effect on the economy as well. How we started this authority, And how will we fund it with the donors as well as the developers who are there? So having a very, very less reliance on the taxable money or tax that we get, the government get, is something that was challenged. And for that, we had numerous studies done as well. We have our own transaction advisory team who are working on each aspect of it. So the waste part of it is mostly EPCF that we want to do the wastewater treatment plants. The river or the river waterfront that is there, we have levied some charges over there on the nearby developers who are paying for it, and that is being done. Road part is also contributed by the locals of the community who are there, as well as RUDA in it. So that is always there. And I feel an addition of a city over here, if it's not being planned, you see all the issues that are there with Shadra, the population that has been growing with the river. 2020, when we started the authority, there was already 30 or 35% of the area that was already filled with all this unplanned population that you see as soon as you cross the motorway bridge. This had to be stopped. Now, if you have a planned city over there, we expect that if there is proper segmentation of the development parcelization that we do in our master plan, we expect that we'll have more and more investors, universities, hospitals that will be coming over there. Now, that is something I also missed about the universities and hospital. So this is actually the first master plan where we have already placed specific areas that will have the central park. So we have converted that into precincts, and each precinct will have a central park, university, hospital, government buildings already planned in there. Generally, we don't see that, and that's why all the traffic issues or the congestion issues are there. But if you plan it right from the start, your road infrastructure, your commercial buildings where they'll be coming, where they would be coming, is planned right from the start. You won't face that issue as we feel that we have over here in Lahore. Other things like some of the choking points in Lahore that is already there, we're also taking that to RUDA and making it more and more friendly for the city. For example, the fruit and vegetable market of Badami Bagh. The study that we did with PAMRA, which is the Agriculture Department authority who deals with all the fruit and vegetable market, it's a business of around 40 to 50 billion per annum. Is currently situated in a very, very bad situation in about 300 canals inside Badami Bagh, and there are 15,000 trucks that are coming in every night. And that creates all the hazards on the roads and traffic issues that we feel now. We are actually relocating it to Kala Khatai. We're inaugurating, inshallah, in this month. And it's a planned fruit and vegetable market on 2,400 canals that we have planned for them, including cold storages. And we are getting all the technical support from Rangis, which is the French vegetable and fruit market, and they're going to train the staff over there of PAMRA as well of how to manage it. Now, taking out these choking points from Lahore and putting it in a more vibrant and developed community would also help. So this is more of a twin city concept where we're actually having a twin city right over here with more planned and developed policies and procedures, as well as regulations that are in place. Also helping Lahore in terms of the transportation links that will be supporting over here. Economy would definitely thrive with this. We're looking for a $40 billion support that this project, this city will provide alongside Lahore economy when once inshallah it is built, same way as we are planning to do it. As I mentioned earlier, the environmental aspects must always be supported. We're very open to ideas. Any support that is coming from the group will always be taken positively. We'll try to improve ourselves as much as we can.
इमरान साहब, मैं गुजारिश आपसे करूँगा कि अब हम, क्योंकि हमने आपको सवाल जवाब से पहले जाने नहीं देना और आपको जाना भी है, तो हम डॉक्टर नबी जी, I'll just wrap it up. I thought for everyone, so if there are more questions in your mind, I have tried wrapping it up in the time that has been given to me.
So I'll now
हम
give it to
फिर
Ijaz
आपको
for-
आप क्लोज कर लीजिए आप
Sure, sir, sure.
उन्होंने तो कर दिया था, आप दोबारा करवा
हाँ, नहीं तो अब हम फिर because we do have questions and we
Ji,
do
sure.
want to
Ji, sure.
interact with you.
Ji, sure, sure.
as well.
Please do so. Ijaz, so I leave you. Thank you very much for your time, for listening.
जी,
And,
thank you. Thank you very much, Imran Saab. I learned a lot. And even if the realization of the project is 10% of what you said, it'll be fantastic. So let me start there. Beaconhouse University, it's a hidden jewel. I couldn't locate it till I came right at the gate. My request to the architects, please put your signboards. I didn't see it. Please make it more visible.
Another point that you need a proper segmentation of educational institutions in one place. You're right next to a marriage hall.
So I'm associated with LUMS, and they call it the Lahore University of Matrimonial Sciences. Okay. Now, when Umar asked me to speak in this panel, I immediately said yes. Umar is my architect. The traffic of requests is always one way. So when Umar said to me, "Could you speak?" I said yes. Then yesterday, I actually looked at the letter from Salim. It said that if you are coming, please commit to the entire 5 hours or don't bother. By then, I had already committed. So Salim, I will escape at some point, and I hope you will forgive me. Now, let me contextualize. Umar also came to my rescue. I said, look, I don't know anything about RUDA. So asking me to speak on RUDA will not be very beneficial. He said, नहीं जी, आप context की बात करें, आप economy की बात करें, जिसमें RUDA ने fit होना है. So that I'm delighted to speak about. Let me start off with an anecdote that illustrates the externalities of any economic action in Pakistan these days. Because we've got two things going on in Pakistan. We've got $32 billion of remittances coming every year. That's a lot of money. And it's been coming for the last 10 years. Before that, it was 7 billion. That came for another 10 years. This process started in the mid-80s. It has been transformational in the following sense, that it has lifted a lot of Pakistanis out of poverty. And the reason is that most of the migrant workers come from low-income households. People headed to the Gulf. They send money back home. That money gets spent largely on housing and food. And over the years, on what would have called luxury goods at the time, but now these are household goods. So real estate and retail have exploded in Pakistan. So when you look at Pakistan on an angle, it doesn't look like a poor country at all. I've had visitors from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, from the West, and they keep saying, where is the problem? You know, they go to MM Alam Road and they go to enclaves in Islamabad and they look at the new airport, etc. They said, where is the problem? The problem is the failure of government to set up a policy framework that translates this $32 billion of money coming in every year into public goods. That's essentially the failure. It's the failure of governance. It is the other side of this failure is the periodic and frequent balance of payments crises that we have. I won't get into the complexities of that issue. Basically, a $32 billion a year has promoted a lot of consumption, whether it is in the form of real estate or economics. Real estate is not investment. It's just transfer of funds from one party to the other. It's not considered investment. So there's been a lot of real estate and there's been a lot of consumption. When you convert real estate into housing, it's very import intensive. Most of the consumption is very import intensive. So even though we have $32 billion in remittances, we have a large trade deficit. And remittances are not sufficient to overcome that. So we have periodic balance of payments crises. We also have a large middle class and a growing middle class, which has demands, which has aspirations. I went to Nathia Gali after 10 years. I've just come back. And Nathia Gali is transformed. I mean, to those of my friends who live in the primrose cottages and the strawberry patches of old colonial Nathia Gali, they are horrified. Nathia Gali ko kya ho gaya? And yes, when you drive, okay, I went in the mid-September, the maddening crowds were not there, so I didn't see the worst side of Nathia Gali. But you could see in the construction, there's a lot of construction along the roads. So that view from Nathia Gali to Dunga Gali is no longer that of a pristine forest. You know, there's urbanization, there's dwellings. But along with that, when I first started going to Nathia Gali in the 1960s, and what I remember is that local people lived in mud hovels, which is why you didn't see them, which is why you thought these were pristine hills, who came to the roads in tattered clothes to beg. There was nothing else going on. But this new construction, which now houses the new middle class, has resulted in transforming the lives of local people. Those mud hovels have been transformed into livable accommodation, pakka accommodation, proper roofing, etc. The local bazaars, I'm not talking about the strips along the main road, but you go down into the local bazaar, the Kalabagh Bazaar, the Dunga Gali Bazaar, etc., the quality of goods sold largely to the local population has transformed. So any such economic event like the transformation of Nathia Gali, which from one angle is awful, but from the other angle is extremely beneficial, any such event, any such transformation results in externalities. What economists call externalities. These are things that are spewed by this development, which are not fully taken into account by the market. So when you have a market transaction, a piece of land gets transacted, or a house gets built, or infrastructure is built, there are certain externalities of large projects which have ramifications beyond the project. So the question is always to think about these externalities. And the reason why we should think about these externalities in a country like Pakistan is because addressing externalities requires public expenditure. Some of it can be managed through regulation, but mostly it requires public expenditure, and sometimes very large public expenditure. To give you one example, Professor West Coast, in a very, very useful introduction, he talked about the hydraulics of River Ravi, the possibility that the river may change its course. Okay. Suppose the river changes the course somewhat upstream of where this development is currently located, and several kilometers upstream. So you have little control over where the river starts to change the channel because it may lie in India. That will be a huge, huge change for this project, and something that we would need to worry about today, because a lot of investments will have already gone into this project. So there are lots of externalities. Now, a positive externality, all externalities are not negative. A positive externality is if, as a result of this investment, you can clean up the river. Everybody will benefit from it, and not just that development. If, as a result of this investment, you can clean up the factories, which are spewing smoke and dust into the atmosphere, which is beneficial for all of Lahore, positive externality. If, as a result, Lahore's economy gets a further boost, that's a positive externality. So there are externalities, both positive and negative, which we need to think about. As I said, negative externalities often require considerable public layout expenditures. Pakistan's fiscal position is its weakest point in the economy. The reason why we have these periodic balance of payments crises is because our fiscal deficit goes through the roof. And what that means is that the government collects in revenue far less than it spends. A lot of city investments are supported by cities' finances. Lahore's finances are not very good. Property tax collection is pathetically low. Punjab as a whole, property tax collection is 0.04% of Punjab's GDP. Okay, in India it's 0.2%, in Turkey it's 1%, and in the developed countries it is 10%, 11% or so. And a lot of property tax is spent on building the public infrastructure. True, RUDA will, as the CEO of RUDA said, RUDA does not intend to draw upon public money. But when you connect public transport networks with RUDA transportation systems, public money will be needed. So we have to think about it. I'm not saying don't do RUDA because of that. But what as citizens of Lahore, we have to make sure that we pay the property tax that's due in order for Lahore to have the kinds of projects that RUDA promises to be. I want to put one more point on the table before I conclude, and that is that for the last many years, Lahore has been spending money which is not really Lahore's. The provincial share and the central pool increased enormously as a result of 2010 changes. That additionality comes for all of the province. When we start spending money disproportionately on Lahore, which we have been doing consistently, it means that public money that should really be spent in those areas which don't have the capacity to raise their own revenues, those areas are being deprived. So if you are depriving those areas to build Lahore's infrastructure, and this is not just about RUDA, this is about general overall Lahore. If you are depriving the low-income areas of Punjab by improving the infrastructure of Lahore, by using the pool, the aggregate pool, rather than generating your own money, then those people have to sit at the table also to decide whether we should do projects like RUDA. They also have to have a say at the table as to what is the ultimate size of Lahore? Where do we want to put a limit on Lahore? Because their share of the money has been used to upgrade Lahore. So these are things that economists worry about. I'm not saying these are all reasons for not doing RUDA, but I'm saying these are reasons for us to think about these. And what I really like is that these conversations are happening at this stage rather than after they've ended, or rather than when things are going on and Imran is there with her troops protesting. So it's much better for these conversations to happen at this stage. And what I have pointed out are some of the externalities of large projects that we need to think about as we move forward. Thank you.
So this was wonderful. I'm going to resist the urge of asking my questions, and I'll just open this up for anyone to jump in and add some things.
Yeah. Imran sir, externalities की जो बात कर रहे हैं डॉक्टर साहब about the river changing course, has that been looked at? Has that been considered? Changing course in India, let's say.
जी बात इन्होंने बिल्कुल सही की और while you are planning for any river ke works, whether it's flooding protection or the hydrology studies that has been done. तो डिज़ाइन के सारे एस्पेक्ट्स में ये कवर्ड होता है बिकॉज द स्टडी दैट वाज टेकन और दैट वाज डन वाज बेस्ड ऑन द सेम प्रिंसिपल वे वी टुक a 1,000-year run for that study of hydrology that we were doing. Now, जहाँ से पानी एंटर हो रहा है थ्रू साइफन और वहाँ से हमने पहले भी एक चैनलाइज किया हुआ है. Our idea was initially जब रूडा को प्लान दिया गया था that was 5-6 kilometers down siphon, not starting from the siphon. The design that we have done, and now we are working on that physical model as well, was to ensure that we have the bunds and the work that starts right from the siphon, including the expansion of the siphon as well. कि अगर in case of any change of course या कुछ इस तरह होता है तो उसमें ऐसी changes ना हो कि नीचे से रूडा स्टार्ट हो रहा है और ऊपर से साइफन से दरिया किसी और तरफ चला गया है. तो वो हो चुका था. I'm sure we have our hydrology expert Mohsin over here. If you want to add something to it.
Sure. In addition to that, if you consider on Pakistan side we have BNU Canal, and BNU Canal was primarily built for defense purpose. So it sets boundary for changing course of the river on Pakistan side. So the river can't change course beyond here. On the Indian side, they do have constructed their defense canals or backward where the river can go. So the river ultimately reach the Ravi cycle, where it is vast and downstream of Ravi cycle, the river then goes south. So the river is anthropologically supposed to take its course and come to our side. So this is a lower division.
Morphologically, the river will not change its course unless a cataclysmic event happens like summer 2011 to 1 years back. So as far as the hydrological studies and other studies are concerned, river, the water can be taken from the river as well as taken in the facility or some other canals by needing, but the course will not change.
उसका एक प्राइमरी रीजन ये भी है बिकॉज इट्स ऑलरेडी बीन बोथ साइड्स इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान में ऑलमोस्ट हम चैनलाइज कर चुके हैं उसको. सो इसको अगर ऑलरेडी कट इन कर दिया इट्स नॉट इन द नेचुरल रिवर स्कोर नेचुरल रिवर एज इट यूज्ड टू बी एनीमोर. और जब उसको हम चैनलाइज कर दिया है उनकी साइड से भी हमारी साइड से भी, सो द कोर्स ऑफ द वाटर दैट्स कमिंग इन इज फ्रॉम दिस साइड.
I was just going to give a follow-up comment on this because India has built barrages on the river Ravi. In addition, one was built in April. Last year, there was a flood threat of, I think, 165,000 cusecs of water being released into the Ravi. So I guess my first question is what happens if they decide, if they have an overflow of water in their barrages and they decide to let it out into Ravi on our side? And then my second question is, in relation to, so one thing is that, so the Supreme Court had stayed construction on the project other than on the 2,000 acres of land that was already acquired. So I'm curious to know the legality of the existing construction that's going on and how that's going on. And then finally, I have a question on the master plan. So a master plan is in addition to land use zones, it is to provide a very detailed description of a project. So in RUDA's own act, it speaks about a spatial plan, a peri-urban structure plan, a planning and development for areas. So at least in 2021, when this case was in the Lahore High Court, I know there was no independent master plan. My last question is there an independent master plan now? And if there is, does it include all these details?
Sorry. Panelists get it just because these questions are important, but a lot of them will be responded and answered during the panel discussion. There are two lawyers. They're going to talk about, this. I don't know. I was thinking that once we are done with the panel discussion, because there will be environmental, social impacts to the communities, but it's up to you. But that was my thinking. Otherwise, we start the debate and.
Yes, I mean, format-wise, it's like if you save it all till the end, then some of it dissipates. So what we can do, and I appreciate that, we are going to have Faisal Naqvi, we're going to have fingers crossed, Rafi. Okay, great.
Yeah, he's coming.
So, so we are going to, but I mean, we can have some tangential or clarification questions हैं और चाय का भी मैं साथ ही कह दूं कि चाय की हम ब्रेक नहीं लेंगे. अगर किसी ने चाय लेनी है वो बाहर लगी हुई है, तो आप लोग, as and when you wish, you can just get a cup of tea, refresh yourself. आप कुछ हाँ, और वो भी हम गपशप करेंगे. मगर आप कुछ कहना चाह रहे थे?
हाँ, मुझे कहना चाह रहा था कि the river Ravi is one of the 3 rivers which has been allotted to India for consumptive use under the Indus Water Treaty. So earlier, part of the water would still escape to Pakistan. The earlier part of the water would come to Pakistan. India has now expanded its consumptive usages so that essentially no water comes to Pakistan under normal circumstances. So the water that we're going to get, I believe, is mostly going to be diverted water in that. The original water in the Ravi, which comes from upstream, is going to be used entirely by India. So to that extent, one, because the river flows originally have been so reduced and now effectively be down to 0, that also affects the chances, so far as I understand it, of the river changing course. Because you don't have those massive floods like you did in the old days, because so much of it gets used up. There are also protections on the Indian side. And secondly, that there are also flood mitigation measures on the Indian side. And then there is a, if I recall, under the Indus Water Treaty, you're supposed to provide notice of releases and things like that. And I don't think we've had that kind of a catastrophic situation so far, though there have been occasions when India has released water without giving us full notice, but not to the extent of destroying people. But
let me just
the other issues to come up.
Let's do something on that. All the trends are that the ice belt will result in flooding in the years to come. So a lot more water will be released in our river system, all the rivers, not just Ravi, before we have depletion of water because there's no ice cap anymore. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but all the trends are in that direction. I had an opportunity to sit with the Secretary of Finance of Indian Punjab many years ago when I was wearing a different hat. And we talked, I got dragged into Rajasthan and Punjab water disputes because of the job that I was doing. And he spoke about the Ravi, and he said, what we do to River Ravi? I said, tell me. He said, we use the water when we need it, and we release the water when we don't. And we do that increasingly. So it'd be terrific if the water can be managed as we would like it to. But the thing to do is to do some contingency analysis right now. Suppose that were not to happen. Suppose additional water is released. How will we protect this massive, at the moment, public, but eventually private investment in these areas?
Basic hydrological planning, it has to be there.
Yes.
Given figures of 620,000, that would take into account the maximum flood rate point given the facilities on the Indian side.
I think now I'm going to concede to Hammad's suggestion. And because this is socio-economic, one thing, we did a site visit yesterday, and one realizes there's a lot of squatter settlements. And this is an issue for all mega cities, right? I mean, unplanned and slum areas. So, land acquisition is a beast in itself. And these are people who have, legal rights to land. But particularly in your next phase, and that would be quite a challenge, a serious challenge for administration as well. When you approach the more congested areas and you have these sort of squatters sitting there. So, are there possibilities, be it through, benevolence or some other way of trying to move those people who are essentially squatting on both sides of the Ravi, And is there any way of involving them in like cash for work and मालियों का काम कर लें कोई मतलब और वो कितने लोग हैं around that area?
जी मैं वो quickly आपका आंसर दे दूं and then we'll move on to the next one. I think Faisal Saab has rightly pointed out the number that we have shown for the hydrology part, which is 613,000 now for any overflows that are coming over there. That's the maximum flood point that we have taken. Anything above that, I hope it doesn't come, but there's a limit to where the design can cater to, and that we have developed over there. At this point of time, 1 लाख क्यूसिक भी नहीं गुजर पाता. अगर 1 लाख क्यूसिक भी आता है हमारे पास पानी, it will all be flooded. इस समर में हमने around 70,000 क्यूसिक, 40 to 50,000 क्यूसिक का जो पानी आया सेफली पास हुआ without even a single point जहाँ से वो हो चुका हो for the current works that we have done. So once it's there, inshallah, 613,000 cusic of water that has been done. The study was conducted in 586,000. All the LSM bridges and everything that you see over there has also been planned and designed on the same principles. The new bridge that is being done by LDA is also being designed on the same principle of 586,000. As far as the legality of the project was concerned, it's a project by the government. I think उनके पास executive है, हमारे पास इख्तियार है कि जहाँ पे हम master plan करें. That's a government role to do. The High Court rightly pointed out and they said कि जो आपने land acquire नहीं की वहाँ पे आप काम नहीं कर सकते, which is absolutely right. The government, even in these projects, should be acquiring land which is more feasible and right on market price rather than that. And that was primarily set for the acquisition of 2,000 to 3,000 acres of land that was acquired at that time through the Act of 1894. उस हद तक limitations दी गई authority के ऊपर कि आप जो land आपने acquire नहीं की उसके ऊपर आप काम नहीं कर सकते. जो land हम acquire करेंगे right on market price पैसे देकर और willfully वो हमें दी जाती है, चाहे वो public infrastructure के लिए हो चाहे road की हो, that we'll be working on. Master plan is a provincial government subject. That's a power of an executives and the government to decide कि उस area में land use plan क्या होगा, and is being done so in the same fashion, in the same manner. Although specifically we have catered to that requirements, हमने वहाँ उस जगह पे कोई काम नहीं किया जहाँ पे पहले acquisition हो चुकी थी. 2021 के बाद जो जितने हम यहाँ पे काम कर रहे हैं, that acquisition tool was not used. We feel as RUDA now as a policy, we don't acquire land on 1894. That's something, a tool that shouldn't be used in any even public projects unless it's very, very necessary or uske koi aise damages ho. So this was done previously for 2,000, 4,000 acres, but we have a land of 140,000 acres. And around 40,000 acres ke upar plan, iska land use plan kya hoga, the local government, the provincial government has that plan over there. We did not have a detailed master plan in 2021. तो हो भी नहीं सकता था. अगस्त में अथॉरिटी बनी थी, एरिया दिया गया था जिसकी बाउंड्रीज थी मगर डिटेल प्लान नहीं था, बिकॉज 4-6 महीनों में डिटेल प्लान तो मेरे ख्याल में बनाना शुरू भी नहीं हुआ था. सो दैट वाज अनदर हाई कोर्ट का जो उस वक्त था कि आप किस प्लान के ऊपर काम कर रहे हैं. सो प्लान की बाउंड्रीज दी गई थी बिकॉज वो एरिया ऑलरेडी मुख्तस था कि आप इससे बाहर नहीं. दिस इज द स्पेसिफिक एरिया ऑफ रूडा दैट वाज देयर. सेक्शन 4 के तहत उसको लगाया गया था एंड दैट वाज देयर. बट उस वक्त डिटेल प्लान नहीं था. जो मास्टर प्लान उस वक्त अवेलेबल था, जो बाउंड्रीज थी, वही बाउंड्रीज आज भी हैं दैट एरिया. बट डिटेल प्लान एज यू मेंशन, द स्पेशल प्लानिंग, द अर्बन प्लान ऑफ इट, as well as the road network, the infrastructure was not there, which is now as it was available, it was submitted to Supreme Court as well. So that is the answer to your second question or the third question. So I hope that satisfies. Sir, आपकी तरफ
जी देखिए क्योंकि
जी the displacement part of it. शादरा के साथ, सईद पार्क के साथ, there's around I believe quite a large number of population that has been living there right river के साथ. डिज़ाइन एस्पेक्ट्स अगर आप देखें, उसके डिज़ाइन में कोई ऐसा इशू नहीं हो सकता कि उनको हम वहाँ से ऐसे डिज़ाइन करें उस पार्ट को कि वो रिवर के एच पे आ जाए या बैंक पे आ जाए एंड दे आर नॉट डिस्प्लेस्ड. वी हैव ट्राइड दैट. वो पॉसिबिलिटी नहीं है. दैट इज़ ऑलरेडी बिकॉज वो उस फ्लड पाथ में है जो उनको आना है. उसके लिए हमारी एक मीटिंग अभी लास्ट मंथ भी हुई सीएम के साथ, वेयर द अथॉरिटी आस्क्ड कि इसमें बाकी डिपार्टमेंट्स और कम्युनिटी के साथ मिलकर हमें एक प्लान बनाना चाहिए, बिकॉज इनकी जो डिस्प्लेसमेंट है, इनको अगर हम घर देंगे, जॉब देंगे, क्या कंपनसेशन दी जाएगी, दैट शुड बी मोर ऑफ अ प्रोविंशियल सब्जेक्ट रादर देन जस्ट द अथॉरिटी सब्जेक्ट, बिकॉज वी विल नॉट हैव दैट sort of funding at this point of time. Also, इनको adjust करना कहीं बाहर भी will be outside our jurisdiction. I mean, will not be in our jurisdiction to convert that somewhere else. A committee has already been formed who is working on these lines. From our end, we have our own environmentalist as well as our urban planning teams in it, where we are proposing them different areas where there can be set and adjusted. The land use जहाँ पे वो लोग रह रहे हैं, whether ये उनके, so there we have categorized them in two ways. एक तो जो सारा river में आ रहे हैं, उनकी इस वक्त land की categorization क्या है, whether they are the owners or they are just living over there temporarily. जो अगर कोई slums हैं तो उनको कैसे convert करेंगे, so both these factors are over there. But again, इसके लिए हमें investment और काफ़ी सारे dialogues चाहिए होंगे, so that is there. I believe so the right step has already been taken. The ex-Prime Minister as well, his recent visit 2-3 weeks ago to RUDA, he also mentioned this कि इनको हम कहीं बाहर जगह पे शिफ्ट किया जाए, और उसके लिए बोर्ड ऑफ रेवेन्यू को और डिप्टी कमिश्नर और कमिश्नर्स को जगह आइडेंटिफाई करने के लिए कह दिया है. The compensation part of it will also be divided by a committee in which RUDA will also be a part with other community members. They'll be helping on it. So this part of it will only start once this is settled and we're able to move them over there. उसके बाद ही हम इस पॉइंट पर काम भी शुरू करा सकेंगे. उससे पहले हमने और दो बाकी जगह स्टॉप करवा दिया है काम कि और फैले ना, बट इस वक्त जो है उसके ऊपर ये डायलॉग की जरूरत है.
Very interesting, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this discussion.
जी, sure.
And we hope these discussions are going to continue, and now we'll wrap up the first panel and move on to the next one.
Thank you very much. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया जी. Thank you.